I saw her sitting alone at that corner table, checking her phone every 30 seconds, and I knew exactly what was happening. Someone had stood her up, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, I couldn't just walk past her. It was a Thursday night in late September. I remember because the restaurant had this warm, golden lighting that made everything feel softer, quieter. I'd been working late at the architecture firm, staring at blueprints until my eyes burned, and I just needed to be somewhere that wasn't my empty apartment. So I ended up at this Italian place downtown. Not fancy, but the kind of spot where you could sit alone with a glass of wine and nobody would bother you. I was 28 then, single for about 6 months after a relationship that had slowly died without either of us having the courage to admit it. I wasn't looking for anything, honestly. I was just trying to figure out who I was when I wasn't trying to be what someone else needed. The hostess seated me near the window. I ordered the carbonara and a glass of red wine, and that's when I noticed her. She was sitting 3 tables away, facing the entrance. Mid-20s, I guessed. Dark hair pulled back loosely, wearing the simple black dress that looked like she'd put thought into it. But it was her face that caught me. She looked nervous, hopeful, the kind of expression you wear when you're waiting for something important. She checked her phone, looked at the door, checked her phone again. I tried not to stare, but something about the way she sat there made it impossible to look away. She had this quiet elegance, but underneath it, I could see the anxiety building. Her fingers drummed against the table. She smiled politely when the waiter asked if she was ready to order. Then she said she was waiting for someone. 20 minutes passed. I watched her go through the stages. First, she was patient, understanding. Maybe he was stuck in traffic. Maybe his meeting ran late. Then came the doubt. The quick glances at the door became longer stares. Her posture changed. She sat a little straighter, like she was trying to convince herself everything was fine. By the time 30 minutes had passed, I could see it in her eyes. He wasn't coming. She ordered a glass of wine, not because she wanted it, but because she needed something to do with her hands. The waiter brought it, and she took a small sip, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth like she was trying to disappear into it. I don't know what came over me. I'm not the type to approach strangers. I'm not smooth or confident with women I don't know. But watching her sit there alone, clearly hurt, clearly embarrassed, I couldn't just ignore it. I stood up before I could talk myself out of it. My heart was pounding as I walked over. She didn't notice me at first. She was staring at her wine glass, lost in thought. When I stopped beside her table, she looked up, and for a second our eyes met. Hers were brown, deep and sad, and trying very hard not to be. "I'm sorry to bother you," I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. "But I couldn't help noticing you've been waiting for a while." She blinked, surprised, maybe a little defensive. "I'm fine. He's just running late." I nodded. "Okay." I should have walked away then. Instead, I said, "Can I sit with you, just so you're not alone?" She stared at me. I could see her processing it. Was I being kind or creepy? Was this genuine, or was I trying something? "I'm not trying to hit on you," I added quickly. I don't think anyone should have to sit alone when they're being stood up." Her expression shifted. The defensiveness cracked just a little. "You think I'm being stood up?" "I think if someone was coming, they'd be here by now." She looked down at her phone, then back at me. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, quietly, she gestured to the chair across from her. "Okay." I sat down. Up close, I could see the small details. The way her mascara was just slightly smudged at the corner of one eye, like maybe she'd been rubbing it. The faint line between her eyebrows that told me she was someone who worried a lot. The delicate silver necklace that caught the light when she moved. "I'm Daniel. Emma." We sat in silence for a moment, not uncomfortable exactly, but charged with something I couldn't name. She took another sip of wine. I could tell she was deciding whether to tell me the truth or keep pretending. "We met online," she said finally. 3 weeks of texting. He seemed different, thoughtful. We were supposed to have dinner tonight. He picked this place. "Did he say anything? Cancel last minute?" She shook her head. "Nothing. I texted him an hour ago. No response. I felt anger rise in my chest. Not at her, at him, at the kind of person who could make plans with someone, let them get dressed up and hopeful, and then just not show up, not even have the decency to send a message. That's cowardly, I said. She smiled sadly. Maybe I should have seen it coming. My friends warned me about online dating. It's not about online dating. It's about him being a coward. She looked at me then, really looked at me, like she was trying to figure out why I cared. Why did you come over here? I thought about it. Because I've been stood up before, and I remember how much it hurts. Not just the rejection, but the sitting there alone, pretending everything's fine while everyone else around you is having a good time. Something shifted in her expression, softened. That's kind of you. I'm just being honest. The waiter appeared, looking between us with barely concealed curiosity. Are you ready to order? Emma hesitated. I could see her calculating, stay and have dinner with a stranger, or leave and go home alone to replay this humiliation in her head. We'll both have the carbonara, I said before she could make the decision. And another glass of wine for her. I'll have the same. The waiter nodded and left. Emma raised an eyebrow at me. Too presumptuous? I asked. A little. She was almost smiling. What if I don't like carbonara? Then I'll eat both plates and you can watch me embarrass myself. She laughed. It was small but real, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her all night. We talked. Not about her failed date, not about my failed relationship. We talked about small things. She told me she worked in marketing for a tech startup. I told her I designed buildings that might never get built. She asked what that meant, and I explained how architecture is as much about dreaming as it is about blueprinting. So you're a professional dreamer, she said. I prefer optimistic realist. That's a contradiction. Most interesting things are. The food came. We ate slowly. The conversation flowed easier than it had any right to. She told me about growing up in a small town upstate, how she moved to the city because she wanted to feel like she was part of something bigger. I told her about my parents, how they'd been married for 35 years and still held hands at dinner. That's rare, she said quietly. I know. Do you want that, what they have? The question caught me off guard, not because it was too personal, but because nobody had ever asked me that directly before. Yeah, I said, I think I do. But I want it to be real, not forced, not settled for. She nodded slowly, like I'd said something she'd been thinking but couldn't put into words. As the restaurant started to empty out around us, I realized we'd been talking for over 2 hours. The candle on our table had burned halfway down, our wine glasses were empty, and neither of us had mentioned leaving. I should probably go, Emma said, but she didn't move. Probably, I agreed, but I didn't want her to. She looked at me. Thank you for tonight, for not letting me sit there alone. You don't
We
have to
paid the
thank
bill.
me.
I insisted.
Still.
She protested. We compromised and split it. Outside, the air was cool and smelled like rain. The street was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic and a saxophone player somewhere down the block. We stood there on the sidewalk, and I could feel something building between us. Not just attraction, though that was there. Something deeper. Recognition, maybe. Like we'd both been wandering through life half asleep and had suddenly woken up at the same moment. I don't usually do this, she said. Do what? Have dinner with strangers who walk up to my table. I don't usually walk up to strangers' tables. She smiled. Then I guess we're both making exceptions. A taxi drove past, spraying water from a puddle. I stepped back, but Emma didn't move fast enough. Water splashed onto her dress. She gasped, looked down at the wet fabric, and then, unexpectedly, she laughed. Perfect ending to a perfect night, she said, but there was no bitterness in it. Here, I shrugged off my jacket and handed it to her. I can't take your jacket. You can, I'll get it back. She looked at me. You want to see me again? It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. Even though I'm clearly a disaster? You're not a disaster. You're human,
And yeah, I want to see you again." She put on my jacket. It was too big on her, the sleeves covering her hands. She looked young and vulnerable and beautiful. "I live 6 blocks from here," she said. "If you want, you could walk me home." My heart jumped. I'd like that. We walked slowly. She told me about her favorite bookstore on the corner of 5th and Main. I told her about the building I was working on, how it was supposed to be this innovative office space, but the client kept asking for compromises that made it just another box. "Why don't you quit?" she asked. "And do what?" "Design something that matters to you, even if nobody ever builds it." "That sounds lonely." "Maybe, or maybe it's better to create something real that nobody sees than to create something hollow that everyone walks through." I'd never thought about it that way. But standing there with her in the quiet street, with the city humming around us, it made perfect sense. We reached her building, a brownstone with ivy climbing up the front. She stopped at the bottom of the steps and turned to face me. "This is me. This is you." Neither of us moved. The moment stretched out, fragile and electric. I could see her breathing, see the way her fingers nervously twisted the edge of my jacket. "Daniel," she said quietly. "Yeah?" "I'm scared." "Of what?" "That I'm going to remember tonight for the rest of my life, that it's going to ruin me for anything ordinary." My chest tightened. Would that be so bad? I don't know, maybe. I've spent so long trying to protect myself from getting hurt, and then you walked over to my table and asked if you could sit with me, and now I don't know what to do with this feeling. I stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral, close enough to see the way her eyes searched mine. "What feeling?" I asked, even though I knew. "Like I've been waiting for you, even before tonight, even before I knew you existed." I reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. Mine were shaking. "I feel it too," I said, "and it scares me too, but I don't want to walk away from it. What if we mess this up? What if we don't?" She smiled, sad and hopeful at the same time. "You're an optimistic realist, remember? And you're someone who moved to the city because you wanted to feel like you were part of something bigger. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the thing you were looking for." She squeezed my hand. "I should go inside." "Yeah." But she didn't let go. Instead, she stepped even closer until there was barely any space between us. I could feel the warmth of her body through my shirt. "Emma," I whispered, "kiss me before I lose my nerve." I cupped her face in my hands. Her skin was soft, her eyes closed, and when I kissed her, it felt like everything in the world clicked into place. It wasn't desperate or rushed. It was slow and certain, like we had all the time in the world, even though we both knew we didn't. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine. "Good night, Daniel. Good night, Emma." She stepped back, reluctantly, and climbed the steps to her door. Before she went inside, she turned back one more time. "I'm keeping your jacket," she called out. "I'm counting on it." She smiled, and then she was gone. I stood there on the sidewalk for a long time after she disappeared inside. The rain finally started to fall, light and soft, and I didn't care. I just stood there, replaying every moment, every word, every look. I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe we'd see each other again and it would be awkward. Maybe the magic of that night wouldn't survive the reality of getting to know each other. Maybe we'd crash and burn spectacularly. But as I walked home through the rain, my jacket gone, my heart full, I realized something important. For the first time in months, I felt awake, present, like I wasn't just going through the motions of living, but actually experiencing it. And even if I never saw her again, even if that one night was all we had, it had already changed everything. Because she was right. I would remember that night for the rest of my life, the way she looked sitting at that table, trying to be brave, the way my heart pounded when I walked over, the way she laughed when the taxi splashed water on her dress, the way her hand felt in mine, the way she whispered, "Kiss me," like she was afraid I wouldn't. I would remember all of it, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. 3 days later, my phone buzzed, an unknown number. "It's Emma. Your jacket is dry cleaned and ready to pick up. Want to come pick it up? Maybe stay for coffee?" I stared at the message, read it 3 times. My hands were shaking. I typed back, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Her response came immediately, "Make it 15. I grabbed my keys and ran. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks.